Thank you, Pete, for the introduction in terms of what we are. Locally, we're a pretty big company globally, but locally we're about 1,000 people. Originally came to Australia through working with a company called Rio Tinto to build out their global product group. So I'm here today to tell you a little bit of a story about what Endava has done in terms of building our AI native methodology and the steps that we took. I'll be open and honest and raw about it. We haven't solved it, and I'll hopefully leave you with some learnings as we finish this. But effectively, it was an experimentation that we had to take. So the first point to kind of start with is our values. So this is one of our most important values at Endava, and it's really not about chasing AI for AI's sake. Technology is our how, and people are our why. It's something that has stayed, even though we've looked at our values and we've tried to reevaluate our values as AI has moved through the industry. But it's really around the method of how we can get people and give people the power and the tooling to see where they can automate and make the most impact as possible. So, any good story has a start, middle, and end. So the three kind of moves that we have for this story is first our realization, and the realization was pretty confronting, to be perfectly honest, and I'll touch on that in a second. The second was Keystone, and then the third then is about the enterprise response. So what is Dava.Flow, and how has Dava.Flow and Miro, and how have we combined, and what have we done? So if we were to hop in a time machine and move back to the realization that generative AI is impressive, and AI across multimodal and LLM and everything else is very impressive, but it was what was going to happen and how it was going to impact our business, and how it did impact our business was that realization. And if we jump back to 2022, let's say the end of 2022, the questions that were there were very basic. They were noisy, they were basic. ChatGPT had just come out and went, it wasn't fully multimodal yet, but it was out there and people were changing. For me, a transformer was Optimus. That's the way I immediately popped into my head. No one really was starting to realize the impact that hallucinations would have on an org. But I guess the most important point to make here is that we were all learning in public. We were learning in public as consultants. Technologists were learning in public, designers, product, everyone was learning in public because we were sharing what we were doing with AI and how AI was impacting. And as a technology consultancy, that's a very raw and scary place to be. That usually when we come into an entity or come into a business, we are brought in for our subject matter intelligence, we're brought in for our expertise. And when we were learning at the same time as our customers, our credibility was questioned. And all professional services, to be perfectly honest with you, credibility was questioned. So very quickly, this was the public perspective and how we all impacted it. But when we looked at what our customers started to ask for, our customers started very quickly to go from curious to responsibility. And it was very quickly the questions became enterprise questions. Where can we use this? How do we use this? Is it safe? What's the cyber risk? And when do we start? So with all of this realization, we also kind of sat back and thought, if we do not figure this out immediately in 2022, 2023, a lot of our knowledge-based work and a knowledge service, the LLMs, the AI, the hyperscalers, the growth, the way the market was moving, it will engulf us, and very, very quickly will be not useful for our customers and our clients. So, a reflex to this, which would be our natural reaction, is not the strategy. And the reaction does not dictate a model that we're trying to create either. Like reacting around, yes, let's just send out thousands of Copilot GPT licenses, or let's give everyone access to AI tools is not enough of a reaction. So we needed to sit back and really think about this structured response that we would take. So the first kind of piece to kind of leave with you was what we did. So the first piece we did, and this is when we started to talk to Miro as well, was we established Keystone, and it was a structured response, almost too structured in itself, but we got a lot of learnings from it, and it later blended into Dava.Flow. Keystone internally became the enablement pillar for Endava 2.0, and we needed to make a net new version of Endava. And when I'm talking about Endava has, in the 11,500 people in the org, 9,000 of those are engineers. 230 to 250 of them are designers. And then the rest of them are kind of analysis, product development, strategy, commercial. So what we wanted to do was flip all of that on its head and align strategy, talent, delivery, ops, legal, commercial thinking, and everything around AI. And that's what we did with Keystone. So the goal really here was to take the strategy and turn it into the concrete capabilities that we had in the business. And also, at the same time, a really simple ask of making sure that what we did, we could learn from. And very quickly, we started to identify that the term maybe build or assemble or establish, as that we would normally think of in an engineering practice, that became something that we really needed to rethink, and the role of the human. And it was really refreshing to see this earlier this morning around the silos of human to human, human to agent, and agent to agent. That was something that we squarely approached maybe about 2 years ago, and we saw that's going to really change our business. So the first thing we did was we broke up a couple of streams, as all strategy starts with pillars and streams and everything else. And we organized our complete work discipline into these streams. The first set was about direction. It was around people. It was around operations. It was, let's establish a North Star around AI and AI nativeness. The second was looking at the people and talent transformation. And Matthias's little example there of widgets. I'm excited to sit down now and talk to the P&T team in Endava and say, this is another way that we can look at it. Because we do face those issues as well about we would love to do more AI nativeness and AI ways of working, but we don't have those capabilities. So really awesome to see that come out today. Third was AI-enabled internal operations. So that was, there's no point in going heavy in delivery if we don't have the internal technology to empower it, or even the legal and risk compliance that needs to come when you do a lot of work in highly regulated industries that we do. The second grouping moved closer to what we would all probably be familiar with. It's client delivery. So it's our AI-enhanced design and engineering, our AI-enhanced engineering and delivery, our AI-enhanced discovery and design. And then one that I feel needs a major overhaul is the AI commercial strategy, specifically talking about the impact that AI is about to have on our fixed price versus our T&M. Because when we move into a post-agile space, T&M, time and materials, being able to build on a time and materials space when you're working with a couple of thousand agents inside your day-to-day working is not possible, because we can achieve now so many things quicker. So we have to now start orientating towards fixed price with customers. And that's one of the big learnings that we took from it. I think the most important outcome of all of this was that we didn't jump straight in on a single tool rollout. We really looked at it as being, the Keystone gave us the conditions for success, and we knew very quickly where we wanted to hone in on. The first I touched on already around the commercial strategy, and we've kind of gone through this transition. I think the industry as a whole has gone through this transition over the last 20 to 25 years, where we started with waterfall, and waterfall as a approach is literally made to optimize for control. Agile is one that's optimized obviously for adaptability, and we believe now that we're moving into that post-agile space, which a lot of places are starting to determine this as being flow, which is really around that continuous value movement and how AI will be enabled in that environment. So what you end up landing in a world of is work is moving through these stages of AI involvement. And this again echoes some of the points from earlier today. I swear I made these slides in a different room. I'm not copying anyone's content. But what the first piece is really around augmenting humans and how we can augment. And that was one of our takeaways. The second was assisting with the workflows. And then naturally then we landed in this, how do we look at increasing the agentic patterns so that we can take on more of the operating load of our professional services business. So to give you just a visual, specifically, you can see as the human workload increases or decreases as we move through these phases of AI adoption, the agent autonomy uplifts. And the goal here is really, I can't underline or overstate this enough. The goal is not to remove the human from the direction of the way we're working. The goal here is first and foremost to move the human to a judgment level and a level of shaping and a level of governance. And again, seeing some of the tools and the way that Miro is evolving their program, even in the year that we've been working using Canvas as the central place, has been really, really exciting to see. So I'm a designer at heart, and one of the most important pieces for me was to send this out into our wider organization, was to make sure that we had a design principle. And that design principle was to be, yes, faster, but value orientated continuously, and always, always, always to be human directed. Even in the markdown files that we have, the first point is leading authority is the human, so that no agent can ever go rogue and try and create some work that we don't need. To give a bit of credibility to this, and this is not just a strategy for strategy point's sake, we are not theorizing from the outside here around AI. Our AI usage, a large share of our AI usage sits in ChatGPT, Enterprise, and Codex. We are a service partner with OpenAI, and up until probably about next month, we've had quite a large amount of tokens to be able to work. That will change, obviously, with the cost of tokenization. And AI is present in everything that we do, from delivery to the Miro, and you can see there we have over 7,000 active Miro users, and that's day-to-day active users. So at a company our scale, from commercial all the way through, and I'll show you a couple of demos as we step through this. The productivity signal as well has to be really real for us. So we're not just looking at a coding with a bit of GPT on the side. We're looking at assistive coding so it can accelerate the material, and we're looking at the agentic tool so it can really elevate the potential of what we have. And lastly, the next move then is really around that continuous delivery, the policy as a code. Policy as a code is going to become probably a term that we all will know and have in our head the same way as hallucination soon, due to quite a lot of the ISO standards changing and the EU AI Act that's going to become in August 2nd. And that means any company that has an office or a basis or ways of working in Europe is going to need to conform to this policy act. So it's great to see the AI trust again coming out there. So all of that has context, and that context for us was Dava.Flow. So in short, Dava.Flow is effectively a governed continuous flow for building measurable value in everything that we do. So we connect every moment of our customer lifecycle, whether it be sensing opportunities, whether it be shaping our response, whether it's the delivery outcome that we're trying to produce, the engineering output, and we do all that through agent-to-human collaboration. We do have agent-to-agent built into it, but the core composite of it is agent-to-human. So there's four kind of structures to this. The first thing was that we are strongly stepping into the post-agile era, and we're doing that confidently. Endava has been built around 25 years, and within that, the establishment of Dava.Flow was built on about 20 years of agile practices and agile ways of working. So we feel really strongly that we can say that and be confident that we do believe that agile is exiting stage left. We also have our AI enhanced phases, which I'll take you through. Key, capture value at every signal, and not just transcripts. Transcripts are transcripts. They're great to bring on a board and use it through, but the role and the power of a sidekick to be able to take that transcript and turn it into something useful cannot be understated as well. That's really important. And the tool agnosticity architecture is specifically built that we don't want to walk in and just say we are only an OpenAI shop or we're only an Anthropic shop or whatever it may be. We need to be tool agnostic so that we can map whatever customer or client. We actually still have clients that have certain regulatory compliance that they do not let us use AI. So we need to be able to think about that space as well, and from a competency point of view. So Dava.Flow in essence is it's four phases, and it's a loop. It's a self-perpetuating loop, and the loop matters. So signal, explore, govern, and evolve. And effectively what we're doing is we're taking every single point of contact with the customer and putting it into a learning flow. So the system, rather than disappearing after a workshop or a delivery sprint, can take all of that on board. In the middle of this, we have a thing called context warehouse. And the context warehouse is effectively taking moments from every single one of these touch points and creating a read and write back and forth for the agents that live in an IDE space to be able to engage. And now, like, where Miro becomes the most important. So I mentioned the context warehouse. Without having Miro hand in hand in this flow, it breaks down. Because until we reach the point of AGI or ASI or whatever neurosymbolic AI that comes after that, we have no long-term memory at an enterprise level that's regulated and also with an ability to distribute across Git, for example. So we use Miro as that central touch point. So every single piece of content, every single piece of context exists in the board space. So when a salesperson goes out and has a coffee, that transcript, that that napkin moment, that sketch goes on the board. When we run workshops with customers, the same board. When we move into generating prototypes, ideation, concepts, planning, Kanban, everything on the board. And what we then do is we then use MCP to then talk back and forth to that board as we move into the IDE space. So I'll go through this in a little bit more detail now, but that's the kind of the headlines. So shared context, customer alignment, and turning insight into action is kind of another design value and another design principle of what it is that we do. I think when we think about how Miro exists internally, and this is a slide that I would produce and show internally to my teams as I move around the different geos and explaining what Dava.Flow is, because the first thing is that we already had a way of working. We had an adaptive model of way of working that was not too dissimilar to how people currently use the double diamond. We diverge, we converge, we bring things together, we build a backlog, we build epics, we build PRDs, we move it into engineering create, it's the day-to-day practice. So being able to say, some of these things don't have to exist anymore, or some of these things are now in collaboration with AI has been really powerful, and it's helping teams align a lot faster. So just to give you a quick snapshot, it's not just about one tool, right? So it's about connecting the whole stack. So the stack that we're currently using, and this is just some of them, is using prototypes, flows, sidekicks, and MCP in harmony with our context warehouse, with our internal enterprise knowledge base, with our own LLMs, and also then just the IDE space as well, because the IDE space is where a lot of this engineering work comes together. So I'm going to tap through these pretty quickly. What I've done is I've tried to take a slice. I'm not expecting anyone to read this. It's just to show you the slice of the sequence. But as I go through this, please don't look at the UX or how the interface looks. Look at the amount of messy detail and the amount of unstructured information and how that information becomes structured signals very, very quickly, and then how it can then carry forward into the future steps. So the first thing we did was we created some internal sidekicks, and the sidekicks was to create consistency with our global entity. So, talking to sellers that may have came up in the cloud space, what we wanted to do was have consistency that AI, it's not, the point isn't that AI, as I said, writes the note. The point is that the first step in the method becomes structured and reusable. So this, and using sidekicks and creating custom-based sidekicks meant that we could distribute that to every single person in Endava and say, if you start a call and grab your transcript, or if you bring in your opening discovery workshop and then you use our custom sidekicks, we can land at a consistent markdown, or we can land at a consistent artifact that we can then move into the next phase. And then as we start to bring in the context, we can then see different forms of client input coming in, whether it be face-to-face discussions, internal solutioning, and so forth. And this is really where discovery starts to become systemized, and we're not relying then on the memory of the person that was in the room, or if someone took the notes, or did someone hit record. I think we've all had that experience. Who's hit record yet? So it's all about getting all of that information and those scattered documents into a single space. With flows, it's really around then making the pattern repeatable. And again, another point that I can't stress enough, the repeatability of this is really important when you're looking at org design and org change. And Flow gives us this. So being able to then go in and say, let's build out the templates, let's build out our prompts, let's have a central prompt space that we can engage with. Let's start working with flows. Let's have all the flows daisy chained together so that when we bring in different patterns and different disciplines and there's a little message there from my wife asking me about my son, probably I forgot to take that out. But you can also end up in slides generation. If you want to have teams to make some slides, you can really bring that operating pattern together. Last two slides. This clip is really around showing how the assistant is working in the material space and not really replacing the team. But what you can see in the middle there is the sidekick that's building out the markdown files. And that markdown file is specifically curated to talk to our IDE space. There's some smarts in the back of the sidekick that will look for specific resonance and severity. And those resonance and severity scores that the sidekick will generate means that we can then move into Explore. And Explore's goal is to build the agentic backlog. So that is the PDLC world in an agent space. And then lastly, the point is that once you make that first pass, it's not always about the final answer, right? So there's always more input that can be added into the program. And the reason why I keep having MCP at the bottom here is that as these boards are exploding over I just tried to move through, maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks of work. The MCP calls that we have built into our context warehouse are making continuous pulls, so that they're pulling down from the board and updating the existing agent space, and then that agent space output into engineering output and into front-end development or back-end development or whatever it is that you're making is continuously reading the boards. And we do that through a thing called conduit, and that's basically just what we're looking at there. So, 2 last points just to leave you with. Efficiency gains and looking for efficiency with AI, if that's where your organization is at, you're doing it's necessary, but it's the bare minimum. What you really need to be looking for here, and the real advantage comes when we move from efficiency to system level change. And that is all around having value creation at the front of your mind in everything that you do and everything that you capture. And the second thing, and just to be completely raw about this is called the productivity J curve. And this is really about, you will all experience this, and maybe you are experiencing it right now. I definitely am, but in org change and in AI adoption, everything starts to slow down. Things start to break. People start to get frustrated. Different departments will always have different opinions around different AI tools and so forth. At that moment, you are specifically building the early productivity dip. You are in this moment of the downward curve, and it's incredibly hard to measure value then. But what you will do is that cost of redesigning the system is also a sign that change is working. And when you see change work and then you start to then pick up the pace over the months and over the weeks as you move forward, you'll then really, really come out the other side and see high measured growth. That's the biggest takeaway that I can take. Dava.Flow has been 18 months in the making, and we are only now starting to find the upward curve. So I'll leave you with that. Hopefully I didn't whiz through that too fast. And thank you for your time and energy. Appreciate it.